Hi, everyone. Rose Webster here. I just want to follow up with you that the Public Health Ontario got back to me about the ticks that get submitted, because all I found out prior to this was that you submit it and they tell you what kind of tick it is, and that's it. So sure enough, at the request of physicians, they do not identify ticks found on animals, which is interesting. And all they use it for is monitor changes in tick populations, but should not be used for diagnosis and management of human disease. Now that makes no sense. That's what an entomologist does. Public Health Ontario, it says right in the name, Public Health. And then I looked up on as many websites as I could, and as far as I can tell, they only test for Lyme disease. As far as I can tell, I saw nothing about rickettsia. CDC does not mention rickettsia at all. And in Canada, anyways, the processing time is 2 to 6 weeks. So somebody didn't even want to sign with their name or credentials. So there you go. Now, this will floor you, those of you in academia. This will absolutely floor you. So Nova University in Lisbon wanted to do a Skype interview with me, and I was initially interested because, I want to get the word out there about how dangerous this is. And so a research fellow, Alani Matuno, she went back and forth with me, and I had wanted to have the entire script of the questions so that I could give proper credit to the researchers, because there are many, many researchers that have worked very hard. Dr. Constancia Ayers worked 10 months on and examined over 1,500 mosquitoes, and her work, I believe it was February 2016, when she alerted the WHO, was completely ignored. And it wasn't until November it was briefly acknowledged and then removed again by the WHO from their webpage. So we really do owe a lot of credit to a lot of researchers that have worked very hard. So you can just read this, because I was aghast that what it appears to be is they want my work. They don't want to put my name on the paper. They don't want to identify the paper it's going to be published in. And they even want my editorial skills. So it looks like Dr. Carla A. Sousa, who has a PhD in medical parasitology, thinks highly enough of my work to even have me edit it before it's published. Of course, without my name on it, her research team's name, her name, and they collect the grant money or the research funding money, and I get nothing. So isn't that interesting? I don't know. That's like beyond plagiarism to me. So you can read through what I put here. There are no strengths, in fact, and I was anonymously sent this study by Jessica King et al. After I published my last paper. And the gist is Wolbachia actually enhances dengue transmission by Aedes aegypti mosquitoes. And I carried on. Her point, we pretend to publish the result. Your name will not be identified in any moment. Okay. And I had said, obviously English is not our first language, but you want to collect it all, not give me any credit whatsoever. And they've not provided me with the questions. I can't give credit to the ignored researchers and lead scientists. And you've not even identified the publications or the media. Where will it appear? We pretend to publish the results in a research article and your name will not be identified. How is that good? That makes zero sense ethically and morally. So then I thought, okay, the only opportunities are as follows. One, people like you can acquire research funding and grants and thereby obtain a degree. And I guess by plagiarizing, nice people like me are trying to. Two, oncologists, including ocular oncologists, can profit from the treatments they provide for some lymphomas, non-Hodgkin's B cell in particular, some rare P53 related cancers, and rare eye conditions that may be the clinical appearance of uveal melanoma. 3, fertility clinic owners will profit from men who are unknowingly suffering low-grade Wolbachia infections. This, of course, will impact their testosterone levels and increase their rates of depression and suicide. There's a lot that goes into that. 4, businesses who profit from gravely ill and or dying people, including babies and children, I guess they'll make more money. So we got a lot of people funding this. You said Bill and Melinda Gates, CDC, NIH, Wellcome Trust, the UK, Brazilian, Australian, Queensland governments, Tahija Foundation, Indonesia, and the Gillespie Family Foundation. Okay. Now, this is horrible. The WHO endorsed the use of it even after Chen Dong et al. Published their findings, which should be making the rounds in every single oncology department around the world. And I blind copied and copied a bunch of people, including media, because this is ridiculous. This is just ridiculous. So I'm going to show you the screenshots I attached, and feel free to put this in any publication.
Hi everyone. So I want to show you the screenshots I included in that email because these are really important ones. Okay, February 2015, detection of Wolbachia genes in a patient with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I've been trolled and people have said, well, you know, the guy was already sick. He already had non-Hodgkin's. No, it appears that Wolbachia agents might be related to NHL. And there was no trace of the worm. So the researchers have concluded Wolbachia should be further evaluated as causes of human infection. This paper alone should be making the rounds in every oncology department right now. And you want to know the connection to uveal melanoma? Well, here you go. Judith A. Ferry states, primary uveal tract lymphoma is typically a low-grade B-cell lymphoma. Involvement is usually unilateral, but occasionally both eyes are involved. Enucleation or removal of the eye has occasionally been performed because of the clinical impression of uveal melanoma. And this absolutely fits with what Chen Dong et al. Have found. Now, everyone's thinking it's just ticks, right? It's not. Mosquitoes are carrying it. And what's going on around Taiwan and China is what's happening here now in North America. And it's going to be worse because what happens with diseases that are common to one area, when it gets into a new species, it's even more virulent. It's even worse because there's no natural immunity at all in populations. So we have Rickettsia identified in 5 species of mosquitoes. 2 of those are Zika vectors. I know you're not told about Culex, but they are a vector and they behave almost opposite of Aedes. They're overnight active and they lay their eggs in rafts of like 100 to 300. So clusters of disease make sense. And then emergency room departments are going to see clusters of people with this, and people are going to think, oh, it's just infection control that didn't clean well, the hospital. No, I think there's something more serious going on here. And clearly, rickettsias will present a considerable public health challenge for the foreseeable future. So you should look at that, because what's going on around Taiwan and China is what's going on now. Now, this is my chart of the 5 research teams that found Culex to be Zika vectors that you're not told about. Every time I talk to a doctor, they're like daytime active, right? 80s. No. And Culex are highly competent vectors of encephalitis viruses. And what I think is happening is Zika's the phage, and I think there are others, especially with the serine to asparagine substitution, that are pulling Wolbachia into the immune system of vertebrates. This is what I think is happening. These are the researchers. Now, I haven't updated this. Evans et al. Also found 7 species, which included Culex, and recommended that Culex quinquefasciatus and other, I think it was Culex tarsalis, should be made a priority. This isn't happening. Researchers aren't getting the dollars for it. They're not being funded by it. Now, this was my Ontario Public Health Lab snippet here. Ticks submitted will not be tested for rickettsia. Now, there's a whole bunch in here, but the Wolbachia D male, Wolbachia pipientis, that's the one. These are all very related. And once you put Wolbachia into a species, it gets into a bird and into a tick or into a mosquito, depending on mosquito, you're changing it somewhat. So, and what I discovered, and this is very disturbing, a rash is not associated with all of these. In fact, without the rash, they're even more deadly infections, and I'll show you that. So the reason I'm so freaked out is that Mosquito Mate is applying for nationwide release. These will not and are not staying in the United States. There are bat ticks in France that have evidence of this. This migratory birds will carry this worldwide. Now, the thing with birds can amplify a virus 1 billion times more than a human can. And this is why birds are so crucial. And everybody in the scientific community is ignoring the fact that Zika is more related to West Nile. There are like 300 species of birds that carry West Nile. Some of them die from it, some of them amplify it. But in 1971, Okia et al. Discovered almost half of bulbuls had Zika. And it's only myself and Dr. Fiona Hunter that have mentioned that. So there are probably quite a few species of birds that are carrying it and amplifying it. Now, here's a big thing that everybody's hung up on. Ooh, I've heard people, even with microbiology degrees, say, it can't, it's a virus is the only thing that can cause cancer, maybe. And they identify one in the stomach, pylori and HPV, I believe. Or I'm sorry if I'm getting these wrong. I'm going off the top of my head and I'm very tired. But no, bacterial DNA may integrate into safe regions of the human genome. And there is the possibility that they could cause mutations that promote cancer. Yes, there is. DMP53 binds specifically to human P53, which is the tumor gene. And almost half of cancers have some implication. Now, it's not just one or two things. I know there's a whole extracellular matrix. There are numerous pathways involved in this. But with the right conditions lining up, you're going to see people that have problems with their brain, eyes, and muscles, anything where the mitochondria are in vast quantities because it competes with the mitochondria. It even interacts with nuclear membranes of cells. So there's a lot to this. And the reason why doctors may miss it, you think, well, when they figure this out, they may only see a fever. That might be it. The thing is, it lives in a vacuole by several membranes, are metabolically active, so it gives a virus everything it needs, which still supports my phage theory, and are able to infect new hosts after blood contact. Now, blood contact is the key thing here, because I see a lot of things online saying, oh, it's cell towers and it's radiation causing these eye problems, and they looked at the eclipse. No, this is a blood thing. This has got to be genes in the blood that have been mutated by some oncogenic factor. And the most logical, and it fits on a multiple species level, is Wolbachia genes in the blood. I'll move on. Now, here I want you to consider this point, okay? This is in 2009. Rickettsiosis are rarely, I'm sorry I can't say it right, they're rarely associated with the formation of an eschar. That's that little black thing that you see with a tick, and then there's, a swollen part, whatever, and big red rash. The ones that produce the highest mortality, the highest death rates, are the ones without that, or without a rash. And if you look in study literature, you'll find this, but it's hard to find. A lot of things are under paywalls. And this team has even said there's still much to be done to understand the interactions between vectors of disease and host endothelium, and we could not find publications addressing this important aspect. And yes, PubMed, the NIH, has removed abstracts, which is why I have hard copies, and I've sent them out because there are people that are going to need to seek a lawyer to get these testing done. Now, this was really bizarre. I was trying to look up what happens with the retina. I know Wolbachia, depending on the strain, And host conditions. There's a lot to it. It will target the retina and optic lobe. And I found this, however, it was untitled on a Google search. 35-year-old male, 4-day history of sudden and progressive, vision loss. It got worse. A head CT showed a hypodense lesion. They didn't identify what it was. They may never know. But I suspect this could be something, a Wolbachia, because it's supposed to be the optic lobe and retina that it can target. Before they got on oral doxycycline, his vision even plummeted, but then made a swift improvement. So thank God, but you're not going to have the luxury of all that time and trial and error and, doing an anterior chamber tap for analysis and sending it off. And here's what's so disturbing. The researchers stated, we were somewhat perplexed by this result considering the negative pan-bacterial DNA PCR analysis. But upon further study, we found that the 16S rRNA gene present in most bacteria and detected by this PCR assay for clarification and species identification is missing in Rickettsia. So, this is highly disturbing. The serologies were also positive for Coxella burnetii. Now, that can be acquired by breathing, by inhalation. So, I highly suspect, just like with Chen Dong et al., that did get the right PCR going, that this is Wolbachia pipientis via these Wolbachia-infected 80s releases, and something else acquires it and gets into Culex and whatever. It goes on. Who knows? Birds and bats, they consume a lot of it. Even fish consume a lot of these things. Now, thank God for this gent. He went from almost, legally blind in his right eye to 20/20 vision in both eyes after 3 months of treatment. And you're talking to a 35-year-old male. Now, you're not going to have the luxury of all that time and trial and error with a child or a baby. You just won't. Now, the more I research this, and there's a lot to this, and I don't want to get too deep, but we actually have opsins that are behaving more like invertebrates. So our pathways with our eyes are more like insects than you would think. And I know a lot of these studies with Zika and Wolbachia, they all think it's all insect related. No. We share similar pathways. Zika's an encephalitis virus. It's not in there with dengue, the hemorrhagic ones, dengue and yellow fever. It's more related to West Nile. So we should be looking at birds and Culex. Phylogenetically, it's supported 97% within that clade. So you're kind of being lied to. Dr. Robert Haley, chief of epidemiology in Texas, said on air that these Zika and West Nile are entirely different, and that people that live nearby tend to travel together. And that had my red flag go up right away. What's he talking about? People that tend to travel together, live in the same area? That sounds bizarre. Now I get it. Because if Culex are laying Wolbachia-infected eggs in hundreds and 100 to 300 on a raft, and you got clusters of disease like in Auburn, Alabama, where it's 83.5 times the national average for uveal melanoma, then you're looking at clusters of these mosquitoes that are overnight active, maybe get into a dorm in the evening, bite a few people. This makes sense. This really clicks. I think it was Mother's Day, NCCN Craft's first guidelines for uveal melanoma. And it looks like Dr. Daniel Coit, a surgical oncologist at Memorial Sloan Kettering and the chair of the NCCN Uveal Melanoma Subcommittee, had said, ocular or uveal melanoma is generally and biologically a very distinct form of melanoma that has very little overlap with cutaneous melanoma. Well, I know there are people that disagree with that. You put Wolbachia genes in the blood and just add normal UV rays, and you're tweaking a few pathways just enough to set off what appears to be uveal melanoma. And here it is. GNA11 somatic mutations are rare in blue nevi. Our data showed that they are well represented in uveal melanoma. In our samples, 83% of uveal melanomas had a constitutive active mutation in either GNAQ or GNA11. And there you go, it's right there in Wolbachia. I looked up the patent, and there you have it. GQ proteins, GNAQ, GNA11. I think GNA14 and GNA15 correlate with lung and esophagus. So these babies that have problems with breathing and tube feeding, they needed a tube feeding because they couldn't swallow. I also wondered, did the Zika let in the Wolbachia? Is that really what's causing those so-called Zika babies? Now here again is the U.S. national incidence rate is 6 per 1 million. And I'm not even including Huntersville here. It's Auburn, Alabama, 83.5 times the national average. And yeah, some of these oncologists, and I see it online in these groups, they don't want to call it a cluster. I think it was Carol Shields said that until we find a cause, I don't want to call it a cluster. It's sort of related to social media. No, it's a cluster. Don't insult us. You know, basic math will tell you it's a cluster. Now, this is bizarre. I stumbled upon this in militarytechnologies.net, and the intraocular melanoma treatment market predicts huge profits during 2017 and 2025. Now, how would anyone know this? You know, like seriously, how would you know that? Now, in Canada here, we had a cluster of what was deadly strep A in a bunch of people, and a 24-year-old woman in great health died actually shortly after giving birth. And I thought to myself, you know, I've worked in 4 hospitals, had a few little fields in healthcare. I'm not a doctor, I don't have a PhD, but I know gram-negative and gram-positive play a role in causing sepsis. So, you might want to look up this paper. Is it group A strep or Wolbachia? And the gist of it is, look, you introduce Wolbachia into somebody, strep A might get a little out of control, but my hypothesis is that maybe strep A contributes a quarter to the overall infection because it changes its structure, or its behavior rather. And then you have Wolbachia maybe responsible for 75% or at least 50% of what is the deadly infection. But Wolbachia, yes, it can kill a healthy person within days. Now, I changed my Twitter. I got back on Twitter. I was off it for a few years. I got back on there and I changed my banner, and I just want to highlight, you know, these birds, these are bulbuls that are introduced, and introduced species do very little wandering. And actually, there's a couple in the Niagara area at a bird zoo of sorts. I don't want to name them, but I did write to them in 2016. They never responded. It's privately owned. I did mention, you know, these could be carriers of Zika. Never heard back. So these are the areas where these birds are. In red are where Eliminate Dengue, which is now called World Mosquito Program, is releasing these and has been. The most recent are Mexico, and then, of course, in the U.S., in the 20 U.S. states just south of the Canadian border. Kentucky, New York, and the 20 states are in there. We got California and Nevada as well, and Florida. They're releasing them right now in Florida until the end of July, which is ample time for birds to acquire it, amplify it, and let it get into the Kulik species, which generally bite humans, generally July to November. However, they can be a year-round thing. You know, they can live in garages. They're hardier. They're 20 times more common, and they're bigger and they're hardier. And they're everywhere, even in the UK. Okay, moving along. So, every month, I think like June, July 1st, I'll do a new one. These are the top 30 cities, or the top 10. It alerted me, my own Google Analytics. Now, you know, people are kind of saying, well, she's not a researcher. She doesn't do real research. That's what this yeah, well, my Google analytics. These are organic visits to a paper I did about men with Zika symptoms, which are probably Wolbachia symptoms because the key words are prostatitis, blood in the semen, all those kind of the symptoms of Zika with the red eye, all those symptoms of Zika. Men are kind of like canaries in a coal mine, I believe. So this is quite striking. New York came out of nowhere between August 1st and September 1st to take third spot, which is very close to Toronto. Toronto now is fourth place. Quezon City, I didn't even know where that was. That's always at the top. Well, it turns out the most homeless people in the entire world live there, including like 1.2 million children. So this very much supports Culex as a vector. And Singapore now is 15th. They have world-class vector control, but they only target 80s. In fact, I think in the US, there's so many departments now, and I've contacted, they only consider 80s the problem. Same in Canada. Nobody's looking at Culex. It's willful negligence. So this is hilarious. Cure, they have some new leadership, so I had said, well, I hope he'll demand that rickettsiosum tested for and identified if Wolbachia is causing what appears to be Oral doxycycline might cure some or maybe many. And then I went into my usual spiel, which people have seen. I did not mention the liver or primary tumor or anything like that, but this is interesting. Hi, Rose. Thank you for your message. Wolbachia and 80s transmission is an important field, but not the focus of Cure 2020 Consortium, which has been funded with a specific research program, focusing on the treatment, understanding, and potential prevention of metastasis. And get this, not the initial rise of the primary tumor in the eye. Oh my God. So it's almost like they know the initial rise of the primary tumor is the liver, isn't it? That's the Freudian slip of the year. So I could not believe. I said, yes, we wouldn't want to find a cure before 2020, I suppose. Pathetic and sad and criminal. So here are the startling facts that point to Wolbachia infecting vertebrates. And even grade school children get this. Shorebirds are down 43%, insectivores down 51%, grassland species down 69%. Now, Culex don't only prefer open bodies of water. They like to lay their eggs in swampy, grassy areas, I found out. And that's not even in the textbooks. I found that out just last year. So that does fit. 60% of Culex lay these rafts, which are like 100 to 300 eggs at a time, on grassy, swampy foliage. So that's good to know. Now, and this happened even though the birds of prey increase, the ones that don't eat insects. So now the fish, and I saw this the other day, somebody with I think a PhD in marine biology saying, it's overexploitation and climate change is killing these whales and whatever. I'm thinking, no, the fish are down 20%. That's bad. But it's not as alarming as all this other stuff. And yes, I do know turtle babies, it's a heat-dependent thing, but there could be Wolbachia infections in turtles as well that is causing 99 out of 100 to be female. So, but I do know temperature has a lot to do with that. Now, North Atlantic right whales, if there are no babies next year, no calves, I should say, I think they're doomed because they're highly promiscuous. Wolbachia will go right through that population. And based on research by Dr. Hamilton, for every one that washes ashore, there's 4 or 5 at sea. And in marine biology circles, I was told, no, it's like 10 are at sea for everyone that washed ashore. So my guess is, and it was conservative, there's about 100 that died. Not the 18 you're being told about. And, I'm not exaggerating here. Sperm counts in men, I don't know why people aren't jumping up and down in the medical community. Down almost 60% in North America, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. And it's clearly not genetic. And I have blind copied and written to the researchers of that study that found that. They didn't look into the cause, but clearly not genetic. Now, here's my guess. My guess is this is why cannabis had to be made legal, because we're going to see a big influx of, this is why men are becoming sterile, because of all the marijuana use now going on. Now, marijuana does affect fertility, but I don't think it causes 60% drops. So keep that in mind. This is what's funded. I even saw research funding prompts go out for, how does air pollution affect fertility? This is how crazy it's getting. So I want to just give you some tips here. Hopefully the Right to Try Act will include doxycycline, because this is going on. And I'll give you a little advice for now, since nobody wants to take this seriously but me in North America, is that these are colics. If they're transmitting Wolbachia, then they're overnight active. So you want to have mosquito nets over your beds. You want to fix screens, okay? Because when you're asleep, you can't detect, a mosquito bite. When you're asleep, put the mosquito nets on. Don't go out for a walk with the baby in the evening, or stroll by the lake, or out without. I wouldn't even take my baby out in the evenings if I were you, between July and November. I'd just find something else to do. Just be aware they're overnight actives. They start biting when the sun goes down, right through that. And this is why the homeless are so affected, and probably why homeless people in their 40s are dying. So anyways, thanks for listening. I know it's long, but I don't know. I have to get other things done so I can make a living. So thanks for listening. Oh, one more thing. Here's Editor Cat. This is the other tip. Sorry. Editor Cat. Get a cat, because they'll detect the mosquito in the house too. Best entomologist in the world, I think. Bye.